Let's go live to the Shadow Cabinet Secretary Zoe McKenzie. Let's talk about entitlements, the expenses issue. It obviously erupted off the back of Anika Wells' visit to New York, costs over $100,000. Are you concerned here, though, that this is a pox on both houses in terms of, you know, this is really reflecting on the whole parliament?
Look, it's certainly whooped up a sort of sentiment of poly hate, I may say. I've noticed that even in relation to my own socials in the last couple of days. People are really angry. They feel that this is just a bridge too far. To be fair, those provisions exist for good reason, for things like helping particularly young mums if they're bringing their bub and maybe their mum or a carer with them to Canberra. I think that's where the rules serve the Australian people best, because they get a diversity of parliamentarians. What we have seen in the last few days and weeks is what the average Australian would see as them funding a house of fun for politicians, and particularly, may I say, Labor ministers. So Oasis concerts, the cricket, the footy, the tennis, 10-hour waits for Comcars. I don't even know how that happens. They have a right to feel miffed, disappointed and questioning how we have a system that enables egregious behaviour like that. In revelation today that a professional lobbyist husband has been coming to Canberra. Who knows, maybe that was there to support his wife, and I hope it was. But the average Australian may also be asking, are they subsidising somebody's business? So look, it's gone pretty far. I think the Prime Minister would be well advised to sit down and have a good hard look at this. His suggestion that it's all at arm's length is just wrong. The government makes the regulations. They can change the regulations. I think at the moment, you know, the only people you're getting on TV, the people who've got nothing to hide in terms of all these entitlements. So I think it would be sensible for the government to have a good hard look at it, because Australians are doing it super tough, right? When eggs have gone up by more than 40%, when your bills are going to go up in January for electricity, when you're looking at more interest rate rises at the end of next year, and, you know, people are having fun weekends in Thredbo with their kids, it just doesn't pass the pub test, my friend.
You spoke about you mentioned the Sarah Hanson-Young matter with her husband, 78 flights, and that he works as a lobbyist. What is that fundamentally a conflict in your mind when it comes to that family reunion provision, that it's not necessarily relevant in that sense?
Look, I think the government should have a good hard look at... Yeah, I think the government should have a good hard look at where these rules mean we get parliamentarians across the ages who can actually come to Canberra. I have deep sympathy for my colleagues on all sides who come from Perth, right? It's really hard. If they get home on a Friday, they're back out again. They get in late on a Friday, they're back out early on a Sunday morning. Let's look at why they exist. Let's think about the dependency of one's offspring. Let's tighten the rules. I think it's time, because what we've seen in the last couple of days, whether it's that one or others that have been cited, they're just absurd. But I want to say at the same time, you know, I've been Chief of Staff to a Trade Minister who, as I recall, had less than 50 nights a year in his own bed. Now, to be fair, we could never get his wife to come anywhere with him, because she just went, why would I want to do that? I don't want to see him. I'll be stuck in bloody trade negotiations all weekend. How dull. But we really wanted to make sure that they could actually see each other, right? They could keep up with what's going on in the family. So those rules exist for a good reason. I don't think the average Australian understands just how much we work. It's pretty much every day of the year. And between sitting periods, you're lucky to get a full day at home. And even then, if you're in the House of Reps in particular, you're out and about, right? So every single day. So
for to drill down your message is, you know, your view, the rules are the basis of it. There are those that need it, use it appropriately. Some are taking the mickey, essentially. That's what you're saying.
I think the government needs to take the summer to have a really good hard look at how these rules are being used, because I think the Australian public is right to be looking at some of the revelations in the last couple of days and go, you know, are you having a laugh at my expense or what? You know, the 10-hour wait for a Comcar, as I said, I do not know how that happens. You know, I remember I've been taken somewhere and it's only for a 45-minute event. He says, I'll come back and get you in 45 minutes. I said, can I leave my luggage here? And he goes, if you do, I have to charge you for waiting. And I said, no, give me the luggage. I'm taking it. I'll do whatever I have to not have you sitting here when you could be looking after someone else or doing something else, and that I unthinkingly charge the taxpayer more than I should, right? But that takes constant vigilance and awareness of the rules, and it would seem that not everybody takes the same approach. So some tightening over summer, I think, would be sensible.
The social media changes. Looks like some support from unlikely quarters. Some MAGA congressional members, Josh Hawley, a senator, saying he likes what he's seeing in Australia. So potentially in some states in the US making a move in this regard as well. So rather than push back at this stage, it sounds like some positive sentiment from the United States. What's your read on this from your constituents locally?
Well, Kieran, you know that I'm also a profound Europhile. So France overnight announced it was going to do something from 15 or 16 next year. Denmark's already on board, and I've had conversations in Germany as well with German policymakers saying they're looking at it too, and at the EU and the OECD, but they've been looking at it for even longer. So it is a world-leading reform, may I say, the one that Prime Minister's been on a ridiculous victory lap on for some time. And remember, this wasn't even their policy. Can I just remind everybody, we started talking about this in the 46th Parliament. Andrew Wallace was talking about it. In the 47th, I mentioned this in my maiden speech. The Prime Minister then, just to fob it off because he didn't like it, sent it off to a committee for investigation, which we did. Then Peter Dutton said, we're going to do it. Then eventually the Prime Minister comes to the party. So good on him. He's done the right thing, but this whole victory lap for it is getting a bit tiresome, may I say. But it's a good policy. We know we've had the books by Jonathan Haidt, Jean Twenge, amongst others, our own Brad Marshall here in Australia, telling us the damage we've done. I've had Frances Haugen in my electorate talking with kids. She's the famous Facebook whistleblower, the one that said Meta knows exactly the damage that's being done to young people through the Instagram platform. So we've been talking about it locally in my electorate for a long time. And I do democracy class up and down the electorate. And kids, a year ago when I was saying, and one of the things I do in Parliament is this social media inquiry, they're like, oh. And now when I say, why do you think we did that? They can say back to me, box and dice. And then they say, thank you, I don't want to have to be online all the time to do my snap things when they have to snap every day, whatever it's called, can't remember. Anyway, they're really quite grateful that they're just going to get a little bit of breathing space back until they're 16. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's certainly the overwhelming view among those that I've spoken to anecdotally, families and parents and so on. Zoe, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.